Welcome to our special sports bulletin today. On the very eve of the 2026 World Cup, an international sports festival that should be filled with absolute joy, an unprecedented wave of bizarre and shocking events is unfolding right before our eyes, events never seen in any previous edition of this tournament. The most prominent, terrifying, and haunting issue cast over us right now is the devastating crisis of player injuries. Organizing a global sporting spectacle of this magnitude, especially with the newly expanded format featuring 48 national teams spread across three massive nations, the United States, Canada, and Mexico, is already an incredibly complex logistical puzzle that requires flawless, meticulous preparation. Yet, just before the opening whistle is set to blow, a deeply distressing crisis is taking place, leaving football fans and sports analysts across the entire globe completely paralyzed with shock. I am talking about the massive, historic wave of elite superstars, the absolute pinnacle of world football, who are simultaneously being forced to withdraw or altogether reject participating in the greatest tournament on earth due to horrific, career-threatening injuries. The atmosphere right now feels completely suffocating. Every single morning I wake up and open my phone, a brand new piece of tragic news strikes the hearts of football lovers everywhere. Over the past few weeks, our sports feeds have not been filled with the usual joyful images of national teams convening, nor have they featured exciting tactical breakdowns or optimistic fan predictions. Instead, they are completely shrouded in the bleak, dark reality of medical reports and hospital updates. Those magical feet, those generational talents who have made billions of people fall in love with the beautiful game, are now collapsing one after another in a manner that is both profoundly baffling and deeply bitter. A dark injury curse is visibly sweeping across the footballing world, creating a colossal, ominous shadow that threatens to completely block out the golden brilliance of the most coveted trophy in sports history. We are actively witnessing an unprecedented Great Depression of physical stamina and athletic health, something never before recorded in the long chronicle of the beautiful game. Thigh muscles, hamstrings, knee joints, and ankles seem to have collectively launched a coordinated strike against the impossible demands placed upon them. Official announcements regarding players withdrawing from their respective national squads are being broadcast continuously at a dizzying pace, leaving the international sports media scrambling just to keep up with the body count. People are rightfully beginning to question whether this is merely an extraordinary run of terrible luck, or if it is, in reality, the final catastrophic drop that overflows the glass after a domestic season that has ground these athletes down to their absolute limits. I constantly ask myself how a human being made of mere flesh and bone can possibly survive the current nightmarish intensity of professional football. They are being forced to run relentlessly on the pitch, having every single ounce of their remaining energy ruthlessly extracted just to feed the colossal, insatiable, money-making machine operated by the governing bodies of world football. The sheer severity of this predicament does not simply stop at conventional physical trauma. It has actively mutated into a ticking psychological time bomb, slowly eroding the mental fortitude of even the most courageous and hardened gladiators on the pitch. The players are genuinely afraid. Yes, you heard me correctly. They are terrified. For the first time in the history of the sport, we are witnessing tears that do not flow from the heartbreak of being eliminated from a tournament, but rather tears of pure, unadulterated helplessness shed right on the training ground during the very final sessions before boarding the plane to North America. Watching the world's top central striker collapse to his knees, burying his face in his hands on the practice pitch when the tournament is only days away from kicking off, makes my heart completely sink. The desire to sacrifice and fight for the national flag is infinite, but the structural boundaries of human physiology are firmly finite. Furious outrage is boiling over within the global football community. Across every single social media forum, on the front pages of the most prestigious sports newspapers, a barrage of fierce criticism is being aimed directly at the utterly inhumane scheduling of the modern football calendar. An expanded tournament naturally dictates that players must toil harder, play more matches, and travel thousands of miles across vastly different time zones. The essential window required for deep muscular recovery has been violently compressed to an absolute minimum. Muscle tissues are given zero time to regenerate, and crucial ligaments are forced to bear extreme levels of tension that far exceed normal human capacity. And then, inevitably, the absolute worst happens. A sharp, patience across an empty training field, instantly signaling the tragic destruction of a lifelong, magnificent dream. The atmosphere inside the locker rooms of these national teams must be more tense than it has ever been. Head coaches are facing the most agonizing, unsolvable personnel puzzles of their managerial careers. Tactical master plans that were carefully crafted, tested, and polished over a 4-year cycle have suddenly vanished into thin air simply because their indispensable pillars cannot stand upright. Managers are forced to patch together fragmented lineups, calling up inexperienced youth players to fill the massive, gaping voids left behind by legendary superstars. The overall competitive quality of this global showcase is now being questioned like never before. Will spectators truly be willing to spend thousands of hard-earned dollars to buy tickets and pack stadiums just to watch the B teams or C teams of footballing giants go head-to-head? The mass absence of these iconic superstars also triggers a devastating domino effect on the commercial side of the industry. Lucrative sponsorship deals worth hundreds of millions and massive global advertising campaigns are all built entirely around the faces and marketing power of these specific individuals. Now that they cannot step onto the grass, the value of broadcasting rights is plummeting, and the overall appeal of the tournament is in a free fall. The organizing committees are sitting on pins and needles, desperately trying to pacify the public and salvage the situation. But how can you possibly replace true footballing artists? The true drama of this bulletin does not lie within dry statistics. It lies within the naked, ugly reality of the modern sports industry, where corporate profit is consistently prioritized over the health and career longevity of human beings. A massive financial empire has been erected upon the sweat, the tears, and quite literally, the blood of these athletes. This sudden, widespread collapse of elite players is the loudest, most undeniable wake-up call possible, striking directly at the conscience of those who govern the sport. They can no longer afford to close their eyes to the tragedy occurring right in front of them. We as fans cannot simply sit back and watch the beautiful game be systematically distorted into a sweatshop that grinds human labor to dust. I want all of you watching this bulletin right now to join me in reflecting deeply on what is truly happening behind the velvet curtains. This was supposed to be a magnificent, vibrant festival, the grandest celebration of human unity and athletic excellence in history. Instead, it is on the verge of transforming into a horrific nightmare, permanently derailing dozens of legendary careers right at their absolute peak. The simultaneous absence of our favorite superstars due to physical ruin and complete exhaustion places the entire sport on red alert. The ultimate question is, how can world football break free from this fatal cycle? Is there still a genuine chance left to rescue a tournament that is teetering on the edge of a total, catastrophic collapse? The shocking details regarding the deepest root causes, the historical patterns, and the calculated corporate greed operating behind the scenes will leave you absolutely stunned. Keep your eyes locked on this screen. because we are only just beginning to peel back the layers of the most terrifying secrets surrounding the tournament this year. Where did this curse truly originate, and why did it explode so violently right when the world needed its heroes the most? To truly understand the absolute depth of our current crisis, we are forced to turn back the wheels of history and look closely at a past era that was incredibly glorious, yet simultaneously filled with deeply disturbing and ruthless dark sides. The history of the World Football Championship is a magnificent chronicle written in the pure gold of triumph, of heart-stopping victories, and of breathtaking artistic performances on the pitch. We once completely lost ourselves in the wild, beautiful dance of football in France during the year 1998, witnessed the historic roaring rise of Asian football in the year 2002, and how can any of us ever forget the fiercely passionate, electric atmosphere in Brazil in the year 2014, a place where football is not merely a sport, but is actively worshipped as the most sacred religion on earth. However, behind the flashing lights of thousands of cameras, and behind the deafening, thunderous roars of celebration from the stands, lies a completely different reality that is profoundly dark, painted with the grim colors of human sacrifice, exhausting labor, and broken promises. For host nations, organizing a world tournament has always been viewed as a golden, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to aggressively showcase their economic power and geopolitical dominance on the global stage. Political leaders are entirely willing to pour tens of billions of dollars into constructing colossal, state-of-the-art stadiums and massive transportation infrastructures, all to serve a single month of brief competition. Yet, after the final whistle blows, after the newly crowned champions lift the golden trophy into the night sky, and after the festive atmosphere completely evaporates into thin air, what remains behind is an incredibly brutal and merciless truth. Those monumental stadiums, which were once the absolute pinnacle of national pride, quickly transform into abandoned, freezing concrete giants, silently rusting away under the harsh rain and sun. These massive architectural legacies, instead of providing long-term social and economic benefits to the local communities, rapidly morph into suffocating financial burdens that heavily crush the economy of the host country, dragging it down into prolonged financial debt and fueling a quiet, smoldering anger deep within the hearts of the citizens. The sheer cruelty of the beautiful game does not merely stop at macroscopic economic devastation, it actively feeds upon the very career longevity of the footballing artists themselves. In the past, world championships traditionally took place during the peak of summer, a time when domestic club leagues had entirely concluded their seasons. This specific timing allowed players a genuine, necessary window to rest. They had ample time to fully recharge their energy reserves and mentally unwind before entering the ultimate life or death battle for their national flags. But as time marched forward, the relentless gears of the multi-billion-dollar football industry became increasingly merciless and illogical. Modern football has aggressively evolved into a truly savage meat grinder that systematically destroys physical health. The modern tactical requirements for intense physical output, aggressive pressing, rapid ball circulation, and high-altitude defensive pressure have pushed the structural limits of human endurance to an absolute red alert. High-speed sprints are executed continuously without a single moment of rest, from the very first second of the match until the final moments of agonizing injury time. Violent bone-crushing collisions aimed directly at shin bones and knee joints appear constantly on the grass. The absolute embodiment of this structural destruction was the World Championship held in Qatar in the year 2022. The unprecedented decision to uproot tradition and move the entire tournament schedule to the winter completely shattered the established order of global football. Elite players were violently thrown directly from the fiery, intense battlegrounds of domestic club competitions straight into the suffocating, incredibly high-pressure environment of the grandest stage on earth without being granted even a single day of muscular recovery. That specific tournament in Qatar was heavily praised by mainstream media as an absolute triumph of organization and quality, culminating in a deeply emotional victory for the ultimate icon of modern football. However, the hidden truth operating behind the scenes was profoundly darker and far more unforgiving. Very few analysts bothered to calculate the horrific price paid in flesh and blood after that brilliant light faded away. Detailed medical reports released after the tournament pointed to a terrifying truth regarding a massive spike in player injuries once these athletes returned to serve their respective clubs. Muscle tears, ruptured anterior cruciate ligaments, and agonizing knee cartilage surgeries occurred with a terrifying frequency never before recorded in the history of the sport. The feet of those magnificent pitch magicians had been thoroughly drained of their very last drops of life force on the sands of the Middle East. Consequently, when the club season reached its absolute climax, when domestic and continental trophies were actively on the line, these legendary figures were forced to become permanent residents of hospital beds, operating rooms, and painful rehabilitation centers for months on end. Looking back at these past tournaments, I can see a ruthless pattern clearly taking shape, a pattern that is systematically dismantling this beautiful sport. These iconic superstars, the very individuals who generate pure magic and joy for millions of fans, are in reality being treated as disposable corporate assets. They are completely trapped in a vicious, inescapable cycle between their deep desire to serve their countries and the immense financial pressure to justify the astronomical wages paid by their club employers. This is a destructive loop that erodes both physical and mental well-being. When their bodies scream out in pure agony, begging for a break, they are instead forced to rely heavily on powerful painkillers and chemical injections to numb their nervous systems just so they can lace up their boots, step onto the field, and run through pure torture. This is the darkest secret of the industry, a stark and brutal truth that governing authorities consistently try to bury beneath heroic anthems and glossy high-budget commercials. This systematic destruction has planted the seeds of immense resentment for decades, and now the ultimate disaster has finally exploded because the threshold of human endurance has been completely shattered. Right at this exact moment, we must summon the ultimate courage to stand face to face with the most naked, raw, and agonizing truth of our modern era. The devastating injury curse we are witnessing is absolutely not some mystical, supernatural, or inexplicable phenomenon that has mysteriously dropped from the heavens above. It has absolutely nothing to do with mere bad luck, unfortunate timing, or unfavorable spiritual alignment, as so many desperate commentators and exhausted managers love to comfort themselves with after watching yet another generational talent tear their anterior cruciate ligament into shreds. No, my friends, absolutely not. The real, undeniable cause behind this crisis is infinitely more cold, calculated, and rock hard. It stems directly from the incredibly packed, suffocating, and utterly relentless match calendars that are meticulously engineered by governing authorities who care exclusively about television broadcasting rights, corporate sponsorships, and bottom-line financial spreadsheets. This historic, unprecedented wave of elite superstars openly refusing to participate in the 2026 World Tournament, which is currently sending massive shockwaves through the entire global football infrastructure, is not a sudden act of childish rebellion or a collective temper tantrum. It is the absolute, final, desperate biological strike of human bodies made of real flesh and bone, bodies that are being aggressively forced to perform far beyond the absolute structural boundaries of human biology. Let us take a moment to look directly and deeply into the horrific, nightmarish itinerary that a top-tier modern footballer is forced to endure over the course of a single calendar year. First, they must survive the grueling domestic league campaign consisting of 38 high-stakes, intensely physical matches alongside multiple domestic cup competitions that offer zero room for error. Following that, they are violently thrown into the newly modified, vastly expanded continental club tournaments, featuring a completely revamped league format that forces teams to play an excessive number of high-intensity group stage games simply to inflate corporate television revenues. But even that is not the absolute worst part of this engineered disaster. The ultimate final straw that broke the camel's back, the definitive event that completely shattered the physical equilibrium of these athletes, was the introduction of the newly expanded 32-team Club World Championship format. This artificial tournament forces exhausted players to compete at maximum intensity for an entire additional month during the peak of summer, effectively completely erasing their traditional off-season holiday and stealing their only opportunity to rest. If you sit down and perform a very simple, basic mathematical calculation, you will realize that a modern elite superstar is now expected to play between 70 and 80 maximum effort matches per year. This is a number that is not only completely insane, but it is also profoundly anti-scientific and dangerous. Human muscle tissues are not industrial steel springs that can endlessly compress and stretch without ever losing their structural integrity. Every single high-speed sprint down the flank, every single bone-rattling slide tackle, every single explosive vertical leap for an aerial duel leaves behind deep, invisible microtraumas hidden deep within the delicate muscle fibers. Under a ruthless, merciless schedule that dictates playing a match every 3 days, the human body is granted absolutely zero time to undergo deep cellular repair. Furthermore, the constant, endless transcontinental flights across multiple oceans and continents completely disrupt the body's natural circadian rhythms and internal biological clocks. These athletes are spending more hours eating and sleeping inside pressurized metallic airplane cabins than they are inside the comfort of their own beds at home. As a direct result of this physical neglect, a predictable, tragic chain reaction begins to unfold across the pitch, a sequence that no medical department can possibly prevent. Hamstring muscles violently tear apart under tension. Knee cartilage is completely ground down to dust under immense structural pressure, and crucial ligaments lose all of their natural elasticity. And then, inevitably, that sharp, horrific snap echoes clearly across the grass, instantly writing the tragic final chapter of a magnificent career that should have lasted for another decade. It is precisely this state of total physical and mental exhaustion that has officially ignited an unprecedented historic revolution within the sporting world. The players have collectively come to the realization that they are being treated as disposable commodities, assets to be completely drained of their life force to maximize the profits of corporate billionaire owners. For the first time in the entire chronicle of modern athletics, we are witnessing a powerful, unified wall of solidarity constructed by the International Professional Footballers Association. The wave of official announcements regarding superstar withdrawals is no longer just a collection of unfortunate medical updates. It is transformed into a fierce, uncompromising ultimatum sent directly to the governing offices of the sport. The biggest names in the industry, the future winners of the Golden Ball, are openly standing together and declaring a complete boycott of this expanded tournament. They are absolutely refusing to gamble the remaining decades of their lives on the prospect of being confined to a wheelchair. They are holding emergency press conferences, looking directly into the cameras, and delivering powerful statements that expose the deeply inhumane nature of the modern football ecosystem. This open defiance has created a massive geopolitical earthquake within the sport, completely paralyzing national federations who find themselves entirely powerless to force their star players onto the field against their will. Furthermore, we must analyze the structural absurdity of the 2026 tournament itself to see how corporate ambition has reached a state of pure madness. Expanding the competition to include 48 national teams does not merely dilute the overall tactical quality of the games, it actively transforms the opening group stage into a brutal, forced march of physical survival. The sheer geographical distance that teams must travel between the United States, Canada, and Mexico represents the absolute worst-case scenario for any professional medical staff. Imagine a squad being forced to play an intense match under the suffocating, scorching desert heat of Texas, only to immediately board a flight and travel thousands of miles to compete in the thin, oxygen-deprived air of high-altitude Mexican cities just a few days later. This is completely decoupled from the spirit of true sportsmanship. It is an artificial survival game explicitly engineered to extract maximum entertainment value at the direct expense of human health. Corporate greed is the true weapon of mass destruction that is slowly but surely killing the beautiful game from within, and the fans are beginning to notice, turning away from uninspired matches played by exhausted, broken athletes. We simply cannot be expected to pay our hard-earned money to watch a tournament filled with second-rate reserve players and completely exhausted squad members who can barely crawl across the finish line. The velvet curtain has been completely ripped apart, exposing the deep-seated ruthlessness of those who pull the strings of the sport. World football is facing an existential threat, and this injury crisis is the definitive death sentence that the system has signed for itself by pushing its greatest treasures into an inescapable abyss. Standing on the absolute precipice of a total and irreversible collapse, we cannot simply sit back in passive silence, expose these dark and terrifying corners of the sports industry, and then fold our arms as the greatest sports festival on earth fades into a distant, melancholy memory. This special bulletin today is absolutely not designed to sow the seeds of ultimate despair or hopelessness within your hearts. Rather, it is explicitly engineered to strike a match and light a powerful torch that can illuminate the single, narrow escape route remaining for world football at this critical juncture in human history. The time has officially arrived for the highest authorities within the governing bodies of world football, the multi-billion-dollar corporate owners of the largest football clubs on the planet, and the international representatives of the professional players' associations to urgently and immediately sit down at the same negotiating table. They must absolutely force themselves to cast away their short-term financial calculations, completely push their insatiable corporate greed to the side, and perform a radical, deep-rooted surgical operation on the sport in order to soothe this massive wave of player boycotts and completely rescue the 2026 World Championship Tournament from total ruin. The solutions presented can no longer be empty, hollow promises splashed across the front pages of sports newspapers, nor can they be shallow, superficial handshakes performed for the cameras before a crowd of media reporters. Instead, they must be ironclad, legally binding regulations woven deeply into the fabric of international sports law. These must be the most urgent, uncompromising, and hard-hitting structural changes designed to protect the fragile, brilliant feet of our footballing artists. The very first step, and undoubtedly the most critical pillar of this rescue mission, is the immediate establishment of a firm, uncrossable red line regarding physical stamina. More specifically, we need an international labor law that strictly dictates the absolute maximum number of competitive minutes a single player is legally allowed to perform over the course of a calendar year. We urgently require an entirely independent, third-party international medical monitoring board that is legally granted supreme, absolute veto power over the decisions of any club manager or national team head coach. If the advanced biometric data indicates that a player has officially touched the dangerous red zone established by this Supreme Council of Sports Medicine, that athlete must be mandatorily forced to enter a period of complete, uninterrupted rest. This rule must be upheld completely, regardless of whether the club of that player is preparing to step into a domestic cup final or a continental championship match of supreme historical importance. Human beings are absolutely not mechanical instruments to be ground down to dust according to the volatile demands of television broadcasting schedules and corporate sponsorship contracts. Drastically reducing the sheer volume of redundant, meaningless matches at the club level, and specifically suspending or completely restructuring the expanded format of the Club World Championship, is an absolute, non-negotiable prerequisite for saving the beautiful game. It is a mathematical and biological impossibility to expect these elite superstars, who have already endured 60 maximum effort matches for their clubs, to immediately undergo another month of intense competitive action right before they are scheduled to report for duty with their national teams. In terms of the actual organization of the 2026 tournament itself, the host committee must immediately execute a radical, sweeping restructuring of the entire match schedule and travel itinerary. Hosting a sprawling tournament across the massive geographical terrains of the United States, Canada, and Mexico demands a flawless, highly scientific optimization of regional mapping. The most practical and effective solution to salvage this tournament right now is to strictly enforce a localized cluster system for every single group in the competition. It is absolutely unacceptable to repeat the nightmarish scenarios where a national squad finishes an intense match on the East Coast of the United States and then is forced to immediately board a long-haul flight to travel thousands of kilometers into the high-altitude, oxygen-deprived mountains of Mexico for their next match just 3 days later. The total geographical distance between consecutive matches must be strictly restricted to the same localized region and identical climate zone. This is the only way to completely eliminate the physical torment of severe jet lag, extreme travel fatigue, and violent thermal shock caused by drastic temperature fluctuations. Furthermore, the mandatory rest period between individual group stage matches must be permanently extended to a minimum of 5 full days. 5 days is the absolute golden standard established by modern sports science as the minimum time frame required for complex muscle groups to naturally repair themselves, clear out deep metabolic waste, and return to an optimal physiological state, thereby drastically and completely reducing the risk of sudden, catastrophic ligament tears. Moreover, the entire medical and healthcare infrastructure of the 2026 tournament must be aggressively upgraded to an unprecedented, hyper-advanced standard. National federations must be provided with massive financial grants to equip their squads with the absolute pinnacle of recovery technology. We are talking about the universal deployment of multi-chamber hyperbaric oxygen systems, advanced full-body cryotherapy chambers capable of inducing extreme sub-zero temperatures inside the dressing rooms immediately after matches, and sophisticated, real-time biometric tracking arrays integrated directly into the kits of the players during every training session. When advanced artificial intelligence systems can automatically predict an impending injury hours before it occurs, by analyzing microscopic changes in heart rate variability and lactic acid accumulation within the muscle tissue, medical staff will finally possess the solid, scientific data required to courageously pull a player out of harm way before it is too late. To successfully implement all of these life-saving solutions, we must directly solve the complex equation of massive financial interests. Global corporate sponsors and multinational media conglomerates holding broadcasting rights worth billions of dollars must undergo a massive awakening. They must realize that their most valuable assets are not the glowing, high-tech electronic advertising boards lining the stadium perimeters, but rather the real, breathing, healthy superstars executing magic on the pitch. Sacrificing a small fraction of short-term broadcast revenue to ensure a healthy generation of players is the only sustainable long-term strategy to preserve the future of the entire football industry. Global audiences are completely willing to accept a tournament with fewer total matches, provided that those matches feature the absolute highest tier of athletic excellence. We want to witness historical battles where every athlete is competing with 100% of their vibrant life force, not a collection of exhausted ghosts limping across a damaged field. Only when the governing directors of the sport show the humility to bend down, listen to the desperate cries for help coming from the players, and elevate human life above financial spreadsheets, will the grandest sports festival on earth truly be reborn, delivering to humanity a spectacular, complete, and unblemished world championship. And that brings us to the definitive conclusion of our deep, dramatic journey through this special sports bulletin today. Across these 4 intense sections of seamless narration, we have traveled together from the initial, stunning shockwaves of superstar injuries through the dark and unforgiving historical patterns of the sport into the raw truth behind the relentless corporate scheduling, and finally onto the bold, visionary solutions required to rescue the 2026 World Tournament. The complete picture of the modern football industry has never been painted with such stark, unmistakable clarity. Sports, at their absolute core, exist to celebrate the magnificent beauty of human strength, athletic artistry, and the indomitable power of the human spirit, not to serve as a corporate coliseum designed to systematically destroy the careers of our most brilliant generational icons. Whether this upcoming historical tournament will succeed as a beautiful celebration or collapse into a tragic farce depends entirely on the courageous decisions made right now by those who hold the destiny of the beautiful game in their hands. This current crisis is the ultimate test of true football love for all of us who desperately want to see artistic brilliance shine upon the green grass. I am deeply anxious to hear your profound thoughts and feelings on this unprecedented injury crisis. Do you believe the governing bodies of world football will finally wake up and implement these vital structural changes before the clock runs out completely? Please drop your insights and detailed opinions in the comment section down below so we can keep this crucial conversation alive. If you found this bulletin gripping, insightful, and valuable, please remember to hit that subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, and share this video with sports fans everywhere so we can continue delivering the most dramatic, unfiltered sports truths directly to your screens every single day. Thank you so much for your incredible time and companionship. Stay safe, stay passionate, and I will see you all in the next broadcast.